On the morning of December 19th, 2017, Westminster, Colorado was buried under a pale winter stillness, the kind that made every sound sharper, the scrape of tires on frost, the faint echo of a school bell in the cold air. Inside Hidden Lake High School, students filtered to the entrance, hoodies drawn tight, shoulders hunched against a chill. Among them was 17-year-old Nathaniel James Holmes, a quiet, blue-eyed boy with a shock of strawberry blonde hair, known for his gentle manner and restless curiosity. That morning, his mother had driven him to school, the same as countless other parents. There was nothing unusual about their routine. But by afternoon, that ordinary drive would become the last confirmed moment anyone could place Nathaniel with certainty. Hidden Lake was a small alternative high school, close-knit, tucked off Lowell Boulevard. It wasn't the kind of place where students could slip away unnoticed. Teachers recognized faces, habits, patterns. Nathaniel had been seen that morning, lingering in the hallway, waiting to catch the attention of a friend. A staff member, according to reports later summarized by the family, told him to return to class. He nodded and walked away. Then he was gone. There was no scene of chaos, no sudden alarm, just the quiet rhythm of a Tuesday that slowly gave way to unease when the hours began to pass without a word from him. By late afternoon, his family began to worry. Calls went unanswered. Messages stayed unread. Nathaniel was known to be responsible, not the type to vanish without letting someone know. That silence became the first crack in a reality that would never fully mend. When his mother called around to friends, no one had seen him. His phone, later discovered, had been left behind. He had no wallet, no money, no ID, no trace of intent, no message, no note, no explanation. His absence was as sudden as it was absolute. By nightfall, the family reported him missing to the Westminster Police Department, and officers began what would become a long and frustrating search. The official entry logged him as a 17-year-old white male, 5'9", around 138 pounds, blue eyes, blonde hair. Last seen wearing a black hoodie with the words Mirage Recovery, jeans, and black sneakers. What began as a missing person report soon became a haunting question that would echo through the years. How does someone simply disappear between the school bell and the street corner? In the days that followed, the family and police canvassed the area, searching alleys, parks, bus stops, and nearby neighborhoods. Flyers went up almost overnight. His face, youthful, kind, and unmistakably hopeful, stared back from telephone poles and storefronts across Westminster. The family's plea was simple. If anyone had seen Nathaniel after that morning, please come forward. Yet, despite those early efforts, no confirmed sightings emerged. No security footage surfaced. The neighborhood was combed, the school rechecked, students re-interviewed. Every lead led to nothing but more questions. Those who knew Nathaniel described him as sensitive and thoughtful, someone who loved music, nature, and making people laugh. But behind the easy smile his family later shared, there had been moments of struggle. In the days before he vanished, he had admitted to experimenting with a pill, reportedly a Xanax, taken from a friend. His parents, concerned, had kept him close that night. There were no heated arguments or dramatic confrontations. Just worry, tempered with love. That context became important later. Not because it explained his disappearance, but because it underscored the mystery. A boy under watch, a family paying attention, a normal school drop-off. Nothing pointed toward what was about to happen. As days turned to weeks, the case grew colder. Local news outlets covered the story briefly, repeating the same few facts. Last seen at Hidden Lake High, 17, wearing a black hoodie. Police said they had no evidence of foul play, but also no evidence he had run away intentionally. Without a phone or money, his disappearance defied logic. His father refused to accept silence as an answer. He turned grief into movement, organizing searches, speaking to community groups, even playing bagpipes in honor of his missing son. The sound carrying like a lament across the parks where volunteers gathered to look for any sign. His mother kept hope alive in smaller ways, by checking messages, revisiting the school, and updating missing person pages late into the night. Online, a growing network of strangers shared his photo, determined to keep the case visible. The hashtag campaign, small at first, began to circulate nationally among missing person advocates. Yet, behind all the noise, there was still no sign of Nathaniel. It was as if he had stepped into the thin winter air and dissolved. Investigators followed every tip that came in. A reported sighting in another city. A rumor from a friend of a friend. Each one led to another dead end. Officers retraced the steps from a morning of December 19th. From the school doors to the last hallway where he was seen. Cameras in nearby businesses offered no clue. None captured his image that day. By spring, the missing posters had weathered in the Colorado sun, corners curled, ink fading, but the family refused to let the case fade with them. They would later say that the hardest part wasn't the uncertainty. It was a feeling that time itself was working against them. As days turned into years, the hope of finding Nathaniel alive grew more fragile, but never disappeared completely. Every December since, they marked the date not as a memorial, but as a call to remember. Nathaniel's photo remains on official missing person registries, his eyes ageless, still watching from posters and databases that never expire. And in Westminster, the school remains open. The hallways still hum with the same routine. Bells ringing, lockers slamming, laughter echoing through the corridors. But for those who remember December 19th, 2017, there's a quiet space between those sounds. A silence that asks what happened to Nathaniel Holmes after he walked away that morning. The answer has never been found, but the search never stopped. In the first 48 hours after Nathaniel Holmes vanished, Westminster police treated the case as they did many teenage disappearances. Cautiously, methodically, with the assumption that a 17-year-old might have chosen to walk away. But as the hours turned into days, it became clear that this was not a story of a runaway. Officers retraced every step from that morning. They began with Hidden Lake High School, a compact campus with few exits and limited areas where a student could vanish without notice. Staff were interviewed, attendance logs checked, hallway cameras reviewed. Nothing captured the moment Nathaniel left. There was no footage of him exiting the building, no shadow on nearby security feeds, no witness who saw him walk in any direction. It was as though he'd been erased from the landscape after that brief exchange with a staff member. His family, meanwhile, refused to wait for protocol. That first night, they printed dozens of missing person flyers, the kind that would soon wallpaper coffee shops, gas stations, and telephone poles across Jefferson County. They used an image that had become iconic in their search. Nathaniel in a simple black hoodie, his face youthful and alert, a half-smile caught somewhere between innocence and distance. Within days, local news picked up the story. The coverage was brief but sympathetic. Reporters described him as a teenager with no known history of running away, last seen at school, wearing casual clothes, possibly without any possessions. For a short time, the public's attention turned toward Westminster's Hidden Lake neighborhood. Then, as it often does, it moved on, but his family didn't. Each morning, they woke with the same mission, to find a thread, any thread. They organized volunteer search parties, following creek beds in wooded areas near the school. They checked parks, trails, and empty lots, holding on to the idea that maybe Nathaniel had sought solitude, that maybe he'd return once he cleared his thoughts. It was winter, though, and Colorado winters are merciless. Every passing day without shelter made that hope harder to sustain. Officers spoke with classmates, piecing together fragments of memory. Some recalled him being quiet that morning, withdrawn but not distressed. Others said he'd mentioned wanting to talk to a friend. None reported any sign of conflict, no fight, no argument. One element haunted investigators: the timing. Nathaniel had been dropped off only hours before his disappearance. He wasn't old enough to drive. Without a car, phone, or cash, how far could he have gone? The absence of digital traces, no texts, calls, or online activity, made it nearly impossible to map his movements. As January 2018 unfolded, police and family widened the search radius. Tips began trickling in: a possible sighting in Denver, another in Boulder. Each one sparked a rush of hope, then disappointment. Witnesses would swear they'd seen a young man matching Nathaniel's photo near a bus stop, or walking into a store, or sitting alone in a park. Detectives followed every one. Each ended in uncertainty. His mother held on to routine to survive. Every night, She logged into missing person forums, replied to strangers who offered prayers or theories. His father threw himself into outreach, playing his bagpipes at awareness events, his music echoing through local parks. For them, it wasn't performance. It was protest against silence. By spring, MissingKids.org had officially listed Nathaniel in their national database. His photo joined thousands of others, each a snapshot of a life interrupted. The listing confirmed his details. Born November 5, 2000. Missing since December 19, 2017. From Westminster, Colorado. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children worked with police to circulate updated posters across the state. Authorities began to shift their tone. By late 2018, they no longer described Nathaniel as a runaway. Officially, they called his disappearance suspicious, though there was still no evidence of foul play. Behind the scenes, detectives rechecked his digital history. His social media showed nothing unusual. No goodbye, no cryptic post, no sudden change in behavior. His browsing history ended abruptly the night before he vanished. Years later, those closest to the case would reflect on that moment, how quickly attention faded, and how the family was left to keep the search alive on their own. The Missing Kids poster would become their anchor, an unchanging portrait of a boy frozen in time, while the world kept moving. In 2019, a friend of the family launched a Facebook page called Bring Nathaniel Home. It became a gathering place for updates, hopes, and appeals for new leads. People shared memories, words of encouragement, and even unverified sightings that flickered and faded as quickly as they appeared. For the family, it was both a comfort and a wound, a reminder how many cared, and how many still had no answers. Despite years of effort, no physical evidence has ever been recovered. No clothing, no phone, no trace of his belongings. The terrain near Westminster offers countless places for a person to vanish. Lakes, wooded patches, industrial edges where the city bleeds into wilderness. But police have found nothing definitive. As time stretched on, the story of Nathaniel Holmes became something larger than one family's tragedy. It became a symbol of the quiet, unrelenting agony of unsolved disappearances, where absence becomes a presence in itself, where questions multiply but answers stay locked away. In interviews, officers would later acknowledge the difficulty of such cases. When a missing person leaves behind no trail, and each lead loops back to beginning. They kept his case active, updating the listing on Colorado's cold case database with each passing year. Nathaniel's name remains there still, next to the words, missing person, status, active, and so, the search never truly stopped. It only changed shape. Each December, as the anniversary of his disappearance approached, his family renewed their efforts, resharing his photo, coordinated with volunteers, and asking one more time, if anyone knows something, please come forward. But time has a way of eroding memory. Witnesses move. Schools change staff. The rhythm of daily life overtakes tragedy. For those who didn't know Nathaniel personally, his story became another unsolved headline. For those who loved him, it remained a wound that refused to close. In 2025, when a popular true crime podcast revisited the case, it brought Nathaniel's story back into national conversation. Listeners were struck by how little had changed, how no new leads, no breakthroughs, had surfaced in nearly 8 years. The host described the case as a vanishing within a safe place, a disappearance that defied logic and haunted everyone who examined it. Today, Nathaniel Holmes is still listed as missing. The official record hasn't changed since that first report. No suspect, no recovery, no closure. But in the living rooms of Westminster and the quiet halls of Hidden Lake High, there are still people who remember that morning. The boy with the soft voice, the calm demeanor, and the promise of a life that should have stretched far beyond that winter day. Some say mysteries like this never truly fade. They just linger, waiting for one overlooked detail, one forgotten witness, one memory that resurfaces at the right time. And until that happens, the Holmes family continues to live in the in-between, suspended between hope and heartbreak, between what they know and what they fear. The search, after all, is more than an investigation now. It's their way of keeping him alive. As months turned into years, the disappearance of Nathaniel Holmes settled into a haunting stillness. one that neither police nor family could shake. The early urgency had faded, but not the determination. Somewhere between the unanswered calls and the long winter nights, the case began to take on the quiet weight of the unknown. By mid-2018, Westminster detectives had exhausted the first round of leads. Every call, every tip, every claim of a sighting had been investigated. None brought them closer to finding Nathaniel. The absence of physical evidence remained their greatest obstacle. There was no phone ping, no bank transaction, no confirmed sighting after 8:30 a.m. on December 19th. Investigators revisited the basics. Who had seen him last? What was his emotional state? What might have drawn him away? The answer stayed vague. Nathaniel was described as kind, intelligent, introspective. He had close relationships with his family. And while he'd been open about experimenting with a pill in the days before he vanished, there was no indication of a downward spiral. His teachers and peers described him as reserved but cooperative, never hostile, never withdrawn enough to raise alarm. The lack of conflict made his disappearance even harder to explain. Runaway cases often leave traces, arguments, plans, or notes. Nathaniel left nothing. It was as though his departure had been an unintended step that somehow became permanent. Meanwhile, the Holmes family transformed their grief into action. They created a small network of volunteers, organizing community searches that stretched across Westminster's green belts and wooded corridors. Friends handed out flyers, updated social pages, and revisited areas previously checked. Each effort ended the same way. More questions, no answers. The Westminster Police Department continued to keep the case active, occasionally reissuing appeals for information. Detectives remained open to any lead, no matter how unlikely. When a tip came in from another state suggesting someone matching Nathaniel's description had been seen near a homeless shelter, investigators coordinated with local authorities there, but it led nowhere. Each new lead offered a spark of hope, quickly extinguished by reality. In 2019, as the second anniversary approached, the family's online presence grew. The Bring Nathaniel Home Facebook page became a kind of digital vigil, a place where strangers could leave messages of support and reminders that he hadn't been forgotten. Members of the community reposted his missing person flyer, shared updates, and marked milestones. Nathaniel's birthday, the day he disappeared, another year passing without answers. His father, still deeply involved in awareness events, often spoke publicly about the importance of keeping missing person cases alive in the public eye. For many families, time becomes the enemy. When the spotlight fades, so does the flow of information. The Holmes family refused to let that happen. Yet, there was a quiet heartbreak beneath their perseverance. Over time, the landscape of the search changed. Familiar volunteers moved on, news outlets stopped returning calls, and the algorithms that once kept Nathaniel's face circulating online began to bury his image under newer cases. For those who loved him, that digital silence was another form of loss. Still, the case continued to live in official records. Nathaniel's entry in the Colorado Cold Case Database was regularly maintained, his status unchanged, missing person, active investigation. The listing confirmed his last known location as Hidden Lake High School and reaffirmed Westminster Police as the lead agency. His information also remained active on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children (NCMEC) website, where age-progressed photos would eventually appear, showing what he might look like as an adult. In 2020, the pandemic slowed community search efforts, but the family found new ways to raise awareness. Virtual events replaced physical gatherings, and missing person organizations continued to highlight Nathaniel's case online. A few investigative podcasts and true crime bloggers revisited the story, reminding audiences that a teenage boy had vanished in broad daylight from a populated area without a trace. Listeners were struck by how ordinary the setting was, a suburban school, a weekday morning, and how total the disappearance became. Unlike the wilderness vanishings or criminal abductions that dominate headlines, Nathaniel's case had no defined edges. It was simply a void surrounded by routine. In 2021 and 2022, Westminster detectives re-examined portions of the file, ensuring that no early lead had been overlooked. Technology had advanced. Digital forensics could sometimes recover traces missed years earlier. But in Nathaniel's case, There were no new digital signals to analyze. His phone had never been turned on again. His accounts remained dormant. Despite the lack of progress, law enforcement never declared the case closed. Officers continued to treat it as a missing person investigation, not a cold file. The distinction mattered to the family. It meant Nathaniel was still being looked for, not forgotten. By 2023, the disappearance had entered its 6th year. Media attention flickered briefly each December as journalists revisited old mysteries for year-end segments. Nathaniel's story was often mentioned among Colorado's enduring unsolved disappearances, alongside others who had vanished without warning. For the Holmes family, anniversaries became both sacred and unbearable. They kept a candle burning each December, a quiet symbol of faith and endurance. Each year, they posted the same message online: "We will never stop looking." As 2024 passed into 2025, the mystery of Nathaniel Holmes found new life in digital storytelling. A handful of YouTube documentaries and podcast features began re-examining the case. True crime creators highlighted the inexplicable nature of his disappearance, how a teenager could vanish from a monitored campus in a matter of minutes. These stories reached millions of viewers and listeners, many learning his name for the first time. One major podcast episode, released in September 2025, detailed the timeline with meticulous accuracy, emphasizing how nothing in Nathaniel's background or circumstances suggested he intended to disappear. The host described the case as one of the most perplexing vanishings in recent Colorado history, a disappearance that left behind no clue, no closure, and no clear theory that fit all the facts. It wasn't sensationalism that drew people in. It was the stillness, the haunting normalcy of that December morning, the unanswered questions that lingered in every hallway of Hidden Lake High. Even now, the official record remains unchanged. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation still lists Nathaniel James Holmes as missing. The Westminster Police Department still encourages anyone with information to come forward. And the family, through every year of uncertainty, continues to hold on to one truth: someone, somewhere, knows something. The silence that follows a disappearance can be louder than any scream. It echoes in the places where a voice should be, in the photos that never age, in the dreams of a family that wakes every day hoping for a knock on the door. For the Holmes family, that silence has become a companion, one they refuse to let have the final word. By the time another year passed, the Holmes family had begun to measure life not by birthdays or holidays, but by anniversaries of absence. December came with the same chill that had swallowed the morning Nathaniel vanished. Each new winter felt like reopening an old wound, and the family's home became a quiet archive of hope. Missing posters in drawers, newspaper clippings on the fridge, and a candle always lit in the living room window. It wasn't symbolic anymore. It was ritual. The Westminster Police Department never closed a case. Detectives continued to receive and review tips, but most led nowhere. Unverified sightings, false alarms, or people who simply resemble Nathaniel from a distance. In missing person investigations, time is both an enemy and a strange companion. Leads go cold, but hope doesn't. Officers who had first taken a report in 2017 said later that Nathaniel's disappearance stayed with them. It was one of those cases that refused to fade into paperwork. Investigators rechecked the earliest hours after Nathaniel vanished. Surveillance footage from around Hidden Lake High School had long since been reviewed, enhanced, and cross-referenced, but offered little beyond confirming his presence that morning. There was no image showing where he went next. Phone records offered no digital trail. His phone was at home, untouched. There were no banking activities, no social media posts, no travel documents. The family tried to make sense of it in human terms. Nathaniel had been a quiet, thoughtful teen, described by teachers as intelligent and introspective. He wasn't known to skip school, and there had been no conflict at home that morning. His mother said she dropped him off like she always did, watched him walk toward the school doors, and then nothing. That was the last moment anyone saw him. With each passing year, online communities of true crime followers, missing persons advocates, and empathetic strangers began to keep the story alive. They shared his photo, an image frozen in time. Nathaniel with short dark hair, soft brown eyes, and a gentle smile that carried more warmth than worry. Many people commented that he looked like someone they might have known, a classmate, a neighbor, a cousin. That familiarity gave the story weight. Age progression technology from a National Center for Missing and Exploited Children produced updated images to show what Nathaniel might look like now, in his mid-20s. His features were rendered with precision. Slightly older eyes, a stronger jawline, subtle changes only time could make. For the family, these images were both a gift and a wound, a glimpse into a future they hadn't been allowed to see. Local awareness efforts never stopped entirely. Flyers occasionally reappeared on community boards in Westminster and nearby towns. Volunteers would bring his name up at missing person events, reminding people that while new cases captured the news, old ones still ached in silence. Detectives said they reviewed every new lead with the same seriousness as day one. The phrase "still open" wasn't just a technicality. It was a promise. In interviews, those close to Nathaniel described him as the kind of young man who loved music and writing. He had talked about wanting to travel, maybe study something creative. He wasn't a runaway stereotype, not a rebellious teen with a plan to vanish, not someone preparing for escape. That's what made the mystery so devastating. There was no reason, no note, no sign of distress. Online sleuths revisited the details, building digital timelines and theories. Though police warned against speculation, Westminster authorities clarified that no credible evidence supported any theory beyond Nathaniel's unexplained disappearance. Still, people were drawn to the story's quiet tragedy, a boy who vanished between two steps, between ordinary moments, leaving behind only questions. Through the years, Nathaniel's mother continued to speak gently about her son. She talked about the small signs that kept her believing, dreams where she saw him older, moments where she felt his presence, a kind of strength she couldn't explain. Hope, she said, wasn't a choice, it was survival. She believed that somewhere, somehow, someone knew something, and until that truth surfaced, she would keep the light on. The case became a fixture in local memory, the kind of story people reference when speaking of unsolved disappearances that hit close to home. Westminster is not a large city. It's the kind of place where faces are familiar and a missing person isn't just a name in a file. It's a scar in the fabric of the community. By the 5th year, Nathaniel's story had found its way into podcasts, awareness campaigns, and YouTube documentaries dedicated to the missing. Each new retelling brought attention back to the facts, but also reignited emotion. Listeners left comments, expressing sympathy and outrage, wondering how someone could vanish without trace in a world full of cameras, phones, and footprints. Investigators remained cautious about updates. They rarely released new details, knowing how easily misinformation spreads. Their last official stance echoed what had been said from the beginning. Nathaniel Holmes was still missing. The case remained active. Any information, no matter how small, could help. In the absence of closure, the story endured as a kind of shared heartbreak, a testament to how absence could become presence. It wasn't just about loss anymore. It was about endurance. Each retelling kept Nathaniel alive in the public memory, a name that refused to fade into statistics. And in Westminster, as another December approached, neighbors said the air still felt different near the school. Not haunted, exactly, but hollow, as if the space where Nathaniel once walked still waited for him to return. As time stretched onward, the search for Nathaniel Holmes evolved into something deeper than investigation. It became endurance. The Westminster Police Department continued to list his disappearance as active, though years had passed without any verified sighting. On the Colorado Bureau of Investigation's cold case database, Nathaniel's name remained fixed among hundreds of others, a reminder that cold doesn't mean forgotten, only pause in the face of uncertainty. Detectives who once worked the front line of the case had since transferred, retired, or moved to other departments, but the case file never gathered dust. Periodically, a review officer would reopen the binder, revisit the early witness statements, and recheck whether new technology, facial recognition, digital tracing, or data analytics, could offer what older methods had missed. So far it hadn't. The Holmes family lived in the tension between faith and exhaustion. Every holiday was marked by an empty chair. Every passing birthday by the question of what Nathaniel might have become. His mother continued to speak about him in the present tense, not out of denial, but devotion. When we stopped saying his name, She once said in an awareness campaign, "That's when we lose him twice." Public empathy, though quieter with time, still surfaced whenever his story was retold. A local paper would occasionally revisit the case, often around December, bringing back his photograph, the same youthful face with soft features, caught mid-smile. Social media reposts followed, reviving online discussions. Each share carried the same hope, that someone, somewhere, might remember something. In the digital age, missing persons cases often find new life through virtual awareness. Nathaniel's case became part of that movement. His profile appeared on missingkids.org, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children periodically refreshed his image with age progression updates. These renderings were scientifically precise, created with input from forensic artists and family photos. They offered a glimpse of a possible present. Nathaniel is a man in his 20s, his expression older but still kind. For the Holmes family, seeing those images stirred conflicting emotions. They were reminders that time had passed, years in which birthdays had been marked only by memory. But they were also proof that the world hadn't let go. Someone out there was still thinking of Nathaniel, still watching, still sharing. Community events for the missing continue to feature his name. At candlelight vigils, volunteers read aloud the names of the missing from Colorado, their faces projected onto screens. When Nathaniel's image appeared, there was often a hush in the crowd. He had become, in some ways, a symbol of unresolved heartbreak. The boy who vanished on an ordinary morning and never came home. Investigators said the case was challenging precisely because it lacked chaos. There was no struggle, no sign of abduction, no digital trace of planning. It was the kind of disappearance that defied modern logic. In an age of surveillance, how could a teenager simply walk out of existence? Over the years, leads continued to trickle in. Some came from people who thought they'd seen Nathaniel in nearby states, Kansas, New Mexico, Arizona. Others were from online tipsters, convinced they'd found clues in photos or posts. The police followed what they could, ruled out what they must, and kept going. But nothing ever led to Nathaniel. Even so, the family held on to belief that absence didn't mean loss. Not yet. His mother often spoke about faith, about light in the dark, about the quiet certainty that she would know if he were truly gone. Hope for her had become a discipline, something practiced daily, not felt. The online true crime community, known for keeping cold cases visible, periodically returned to Nathaniel's story. Podcasts like True Crime with Kendall Ray and Missing People in America featured his case, retelling the known facts and reminding listeners that there were still unanswered questions. These episodes often sparked fresh attention, with listeners posting comments of empathy and solidarity. In 2023, a renewed digital campaign by volunteers surfaced, a coordinated effort to reshare Nathaniel's profile across platforms. The campaign used the hashtag #FindNathanielHolmes, reaching thousands of users across the U.S. Though no breakthrough followed, it reignited awareness and encouraged new tips to Westminster PD. Through all this, officials maintained their focus. The case was not closed. The cold case listing wasn't a declaration of finality. It was an administrative term, one that left the door open to discovery. Detectives reiterated that they welcomed any new information, even years later. Behind the scenes, forensic analysts occasionally revisited archived evidence, including data logs, student statements, and known routes Nathaniel might have walked that day. In 2025, the department confirmed the case was still classified as active missing person, not presumed deceased. For the family, that distinction mattered. It meant hope was still officially recognized, not just privately carried. Those who knew Nathaniel described him as quiet, but kind, the kind of person who noticed when others were hurting. Friends from school remembered his calm, his curiosity, and how he'd listen more than he spoke. Teachers said he had potential, creative, thoughtful, the kind of student who would think before answering. Remembering those details gave the story human weight. Nathaniel wasn't just a statistic. He was a son, a student, a friend, someone who deserved to be found. The years had weathered everyone involved. Investigators spoke of the case as one that stayed with them long after shift changes and promotions. Journalists called it haunting, not because of violence, but because of silence. And for those who still searched, the unanswered question was no longer just where Nathaniel had gone, but how a life could vanish so completely, and why, even after all this time, the trail remained invisible. Each December, the Holmes family renewed their public appeal, releasing statements through local outlets. Please don't forget Nathaniel. Someone knows something. We just need that one person to speak. The story's endurance, in the end, became its message, a quiet insistence that every missing person, no matter how long gone, deserves to be remembered, searched for, and spoken until the truth returns. And so, the light in the Holmes window still burned, its flame steady against the passing years, a small, persistent symbol of belief that somewhere out there, Nathaniel might still find his way home. 8 years have passed since Nathaniel Holmes was last seen. In that time, entire generations of students have walked the halls of Hidden Lake High School, new faces, new stories, unaware that one of their own simply vanished one morning in December 2017. Yet for the Holmes family, time hasn't healed or replaced anything. It has only stretched the distance between then and now. The case file still sits within the Westminster Police Department's active investigations. Detectives occasionally revisit it, adding new reports, cross-referencing data with updated national databases, and reviewing tips as they come. Nathaniel's name still appears on the Colorado Bureau of Investigation's cold case database, marked simply as missing, on missingkids.org. His photo remains, now alongside an age-progressed image, showing what he might look like as an adult in his mid-20s. These reminders serve as both evidence and promise that he has not been forgotten. In an age where information moves faster than memory, Nathaniel's story persists through persistence alone, through a mother who refuses silence, through small online communities that keep his name circulating, through advocates who see in his case the larger story of America's missing youth. Every so often, local news revisits his disappearance. The stories are brief, factual, a photo, a recap, a phone number for tips. Yet the effect is cumulative. Each retelling reawakens the same ache, the same unanswered question. How could a teenager vanish in broad daylight without leaving a single trace? Authorities have confirmed repeatedly that the investigation remains open. It has never been reclassified as anything else. That phrase, still open, has become almost sacred to the family. It means that the door is not closed, that there is still space for truth to emerge. And though years have passed, the Westminster Police Department continues to encourage anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward. Over time, the story of Nathaniel Holmes has come to represent more than one boy's disappearance. It speaks to a wider silence, the quiet, unresolved pain of families across the country who live in limbo, suspended between hope and heartbreak. In interviews, missing person advocates often reference cases like Nathaniel's to emphasize why attention matters, because disappearance doesn't end when the headlines fade. In 2025, renewed online discussions brought Nathaniel's case back into view after a true crime podcast revisited it in detail. The episode traced every known fact, avoiding speculation, but emphasizing the humanity of the loss. Listeners responded with empathy, sharing messages of support for the Holmes family and astonishment that, in a world so connected, someone could still disappear completely. For the Holmes family, hope has taken on many forms. It has been quiet, stubborn, and enduring. Nathaniel's mother continues to keep his memory alive, participating in missing person awareness events, lighting a candle every year on the anniversary of his disappearance, and reminding others that behind every unsolved case is a person, not just a file. The photograph most often shared shows Nathaniel at 17, smiling softly, unaware of what history would make of that image. It's been printed on flyers, digital banners, and awareness posters. Over the years, it has come to symbolize both the fragility of youth and the permanence of love. There's no monument for Nathaniel Holmes, no plaque, no memorial, but his story lives through those who remember it. Each time someone shares his picture or speaks his name, it's a small act of resistance against forgetting. The Holmes family often says that the opposite of closure isn't despair, it's endurance. As of now, no evidence has emerged to indicate what happened after Nathaniel walked toward Hidden Lake High School that winter morning. No remains have been found, no verified sightings confirmed, no suspect identified. The investigation remains open, active, and unresolved. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children continues to host its profile, and Westminster Police Department investigators still receive tips through their public channels. They ask anyone with information to contact them directly. Because sometimes one overlooked detail, one recollection, one conversation can change everything. For those who follow this story, the lesson has been quiet but profound. That memory itself is a form of justice. Keeping Nathaniel's name alive ensures that his story does not dissolve into the vast archive of the missing. In the years since, hundreds of people have reached out to the family, some offering support, others sharing stories of their own missing loved ones. It has created an invisible network of empathy that spans beyond Westminster, a shared language of waiting and hope. The story of Nathaniel Holmes endures not because of tragedy, but because of love. Love that refuses to fade. Love that survives unanswered questions. Love that still believes in the possibility of return. And so, the light in the window continues to burn. It has become a fixture now, soft but unwavering. On certain winter nights, neighbors still notice it when passing by. That small glow against the dark, the same one that's been there since the morning Nathaniel disappeared. A reminder to anyone who sees it that hope can live even in silence, that a name spoken aloud can still echo long after the world stops listening, that somewhere out there, perhaps, the truth still waits to be found.